Welcome. It's a nice way to spend what you started out to be a very rainy day. The sun is coming out now that poetry is about to happen. I'm Giovanni Singleton, Lunch Poems Coordinator, and thank you all for being here today. First, I'd like to invite you to sign up on our email list, which is over on the librarian's desk. We also have copies of our schedule for the entire year. Please know that if you've missed a reading, that they are on our YouTube channel. We have our very own, so please check out our past readings. Also, next month, please come back and join us on April 5th for a reading by Matthew Zapruder. And now please welcome Jeffrey G. O'Brien, Lunch Poems Director, who will introduce this afternoon's special guest.
Thank you, Giovanni, and welcome, Rosa. I usually introduce with words, but I'm going to start today with a slight moment of show and tell, holding up the cover of Rosa Alcalà's most recent book, which is for sale over there, courtesy of Mo's after the reading. I do this because when it's been referred to online, it's conveniently spelled my other tongue, but obviously the graphic here indicates all of the other ways that one could think, see, pronounce, read, and encounter the language. You could make it say mother tongue or her tongue, so that it works both by erasure and by changing boundaries and borders between words. In so doing, I think we could say that the title either has no exact name or many names, rather than the convenience of a single name. And I think that kind of thinking about multiplicity and maybe non-singularity, as opposed to just multiplicity, is crucial to Rosa Alcalà's work and always has been, especially in a book that's adamantly about the perils and pleasures of bilinguality, about the perils and pleasures of being intergenerationally female-identified. In some ways, this book, as topic, is considering the death of a mother and the birth of a child and the continuities across generations. As I was thinking about the book and beginning to dip into it, I was thinking about the kinds of space that second wave feminist poets were clearing in the 70s and 80s especially around questions of gendered labor and gendered care, motherhood, right? And I was thinking particularly about Bernadette Mayer and Alice Notley, and lo and behold, like I get into the book and Bernadette Mayer is being quoted, so I wasn't the only person thinking about this. One poem ends, Bernadette Mayer turns to me in the shower and says, motherhood is now fashionable among the girl poets. But it reminded me that that space that was cleared and then re-inhabited with a kind of vocation that has been too invisible in the history of poetry until recently is a space that has to be re-cleared again and again and again and isn't yet adequately represented. So this is a book that protects against the re-erasure of the very things that space has been made for. But it's not just about gendered labor and the labor of childbirth. It's also a book that's really angry about this dream called money that we live in. It's thinking about all kinds of labor rather than only the labor of a particular category. There's a long poem called The 11th Day of Occupy Wall Street, and there's a great poem called Offering, which ends, I gave industry an organ. And I think that's a perfect way of moving across another barrier or border between work that happens in the home and work that happens outside the home, work that happens in the body and on the body and between bodies. Rosa is always thinking about all these things in a kind of variable tone that seems to move between lament and wit, but often can occupy both those poles at the same time. I think you'll hear what I mean very shortly. Please welcome Rosa Alcalá.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. How are you? Thank you, Giovanni, who I met in the desert when she was in Las Cruces, and I'm in El Paso now, so it's nice to see you on your turf. and Jeffrey G. O'Brien. What a beautiful introduction. I like new wave feminism myself. I will bring back my asymmetrical haircut from the 80s if I have to. But yes, I think those two things work well together for me. Thank you everyone here at Berkeley and this library, which is amazing. I was walking through and it was still kind of rainy. And I said, it feels like an enchanted forest, right? Because I live in the desert. So it's like this enchanted forest, and then you end up in this library. And it's sort of the perfect sort of culmination to that walk here. It seems to have stopped raining. The sun is out. The birds are chirping. So I feel very welcome. And all of you are here, which is nice. It's like on every side. Okay. So I think Jeffrey gave a really nice introduction to my book, and it's true that the title is variable. I often, just for expediency, call it My Other Tongue, but when I was working with the designer on the cover, I wanted to make sure that the multiple ways to think about this title were present, because it is about this struggle that I think many children of immigrants have between what is considered their mother tongue, which is a problematic term because it suggests that mother tongue means the tongue that you're most fluent in or you dominate. But that's not necessarily the case for the children of immigrants. Our mother tongue isn't necessarily the tongue that we feel most comfortable speaking in. And then there's the other tongue. And this is also about motherhood. So mother tongue also suggests this sort of the corporeal sort of experience of being a mother, but also being othered by having that other come out of you. And it's about language. So my tongue is here. And I like the pink feels like a tongue to me. It looks like a little tongue on the cover. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to start with some poems from my other tongue, mother tongue, her tongue, their tongue, your tongue. So this poem started off as a poem to my mother, Maria, and then I started thinking about how common the name Maria is, if you think of all the variations of Maria, such as Mary and Marie. Mariah, it's probably one of the most common names for a woman around the world. So then this letter became a letter to all Marias and variations of Maria. Dear Maria, dear Mary, Mariah, Marie, dear Mama, Mamacita, and Mommy, dear fourth wheel of the Trinity, dear Puerto Rican ingenue in a red sash, dear off with their heads, dear diva, dear aria missing its M, dear storage engine, dear ships in your name, dear asteroid discovered in 1877, dear song by Café Tacuba, Green Day, The Jacksons, Men at Work, Blondie, Ricky Martin, Wu-Tang Clan, et al. Dear Maria, spoken in The Bird's Tale of Papua New Guinea. How do you solve a problem like Maria? Dear pool-type reactor, dear uranium, how you enrich us, dear Spanish biscuit, dear sacrificial virgins of red or blonde hair, of dark brunette, of the slip, apron, or veil, but never a hat, of the fresh complexion turned composite, of Jack the Ripper's complete works, of fluency in Welsh, Spanish, English, Quechua, French, of obscure and undocumented origins, and of las colonias, querida María de los Ángeles, de la Luz, de Jesús, del Refugio, walking home or waiting for transporte de personal without executive safe routes. Dear Señorita Maquiladora, dexterous, tolerant of tedium, model workers for Lexmark, Foxconn, Comscope, etc. Dear Queen of the Plasma TV and Print Cartridge, dear Miss Stainless Steel Appliance, dear Crowned with Cigarettes, Soda Cans, Boot Prints, dear Left Without Nipples in the Desert Branded, dear Virgen de Guadalupe, hand us your sanitary napkin, blessed art thou, your blood is on everything. So, like Jeffrey said, this book is about gendered labor for sure. My mother worked in a textile factory, as did my dad, for most of their lives. And so I often write about textile work. And so that came up, textile work and also factory work in general. And the poem that I just read, Dear Maria, deals with factory workers in Juarez who work in factories owned by multinational companies, and much of the electronics that we have in our homes made there. This poem is called Voice Activation. And it starts off with an epigraph by Wittgenstein. Do not forget that a poem, although it is composed in the language of information, is not used in the language game of giving information.
This poem, on the other hand, is activated by the sound of my voice, and, luckily, I am a native speaker. Luckily, I have no accent and you can understand perfectly what I am saying to you via this poem. I have been working on this limpid voice, from which you can read each word as if rounded in my mouth, as if my tongue were pushing into my teeth, my lips meeting and jaws flexing, so that even if from birth you've been taught to read faces before words and words as faces, you'll feel not at all confused with what I say on the page. But maybe you'll see my name and feel a twinge of confusion. Have no doubt, my poem is innocent and transparent. So when I say, I think I'll make myself a sandwich, the poem does not say, I drink an aisle of bad trips. Or if I say, my mother is dying, where's her phone? The poem does not say, try other at spying, spare us or foam. One way to ensure the poem and its reader no misunderstanding is to never modulate. I'm done with emotion, I'm done, especially, with that certain weakness called exiting one's intention. What I mean is Spanish. What a mess that is, fishing for good old American bread, and ending up with a boatload of uncles and their boxes of salt cod, a round of ants poking for fat in your middle. So you see, Wittgenstein, even the sandwich isn't always made to my specifications, it's the poem that does what I demand. Everything else requires a series of steps. I call the nurse's station and explain to the nurse, her accent thick as thieves, that I'd like to speak to my mother. She calls out to my mother, it's your daughter really, she says this in Spanish, but for the sake of voice activation and this poem, you understand I can't go there, and she hands the phone to my mother, and my mother, who is not the poem, has trouble understanding me. So I write this poem, which understands me perfectly, and never needs the nurse's station, and never worries about unintelligible accents, or speaking loudly enough, or the trouble with dying, which can be understood as a loss of language. If so, the immigrant, my mother, has been misunderstood for so long. This death is from her last interpreters.
I read somewhere that those voice activation apps have a hard time hearing not just foreign accents, but also female voices. I'm getting over a cold, so excuse me. Just has to be done. How's everyone doing? Could you hear that okay? I couldn't tell from up here. Oh, I'm so glad. I couldn't tell. I thought you were all just politely smiling at me, waiting for it to be over if you couldn't hear it. This is called This Is Not the End of My Film Career. And this is a persona poem. I tend not to write persona poems. Someone told me it was a persona poem. I didn't know. I just thought it was one of my poems. And then Stephanie Burt has said that all poems are persona poems. I think that's interesting. This this poem, I'll give you a little bit of a background. So I've written about this for something I did online that asked me to talk about one of my poems. My mother had dementia the last few years of her life, and we learned that she had dementia because she fell, and after the firemen had sort of broken into her apartment. I learned all of this from my brother over the phone, but he said that she thought she was in a play when she fell. She had spent the night on the floor, several hours on the floor, and she thought she was in a play that had been written by my sister-in-law, and that she was playing the grandma. So that in some ways she was, I guess, distancing herself from the trauma of what had happened. But it was really interesting because this carried through for a while. She was in the hospital for a while, and she thought that the woman who shared the room with her was a film director who was going to put her in her film. And my mother really wanted to be an artist. I mean, she didn't have the opportunity. Like, she started working in a factory when she was 14. But I think this was kind of a beautiful delusion for her to imagine herself as an actress for that time. So this is a poem, I guess the persona poem in her voice, which wouldn't be in her voice because she didn't speak English. So this is my voice and her voice. This is not the end of my film career. Look, I may be no Meryl Streep, but unlike that daughter of the revolution, I do my own stunts. Wig or no wig, I'm going to play the hell out of this part. For example, in the first scene, they wanted Grandma to break a hip, so I gave them a broken hip. I careened from kitchen counter over stools and fell precisely on my mark. People know when they're being fooled. They want the real thing. Do you know what I told the director when the firemen chopped down the door to save poor old Granny? I cannot work like this. They are too pretty to put out fires. I'll just lie here until you find the right type to carry me off the screen. The child actors, like my very own children, grew tired of the delays and shoved the food stylist's props into their mouths. It's the same thing for this extended nursing home scene. I told the director, look, the lighting in here is terrible, and there are so many characters at different hours, I'm not even sure we know what the story is anymore. I'll have to review my contract when my son comes in for his cameo. Did I mention my daughter-in-law wrote the script? She keeps revising it, but the ending's the same. Sure, I've heard the gossip that I'm being replaced by someone younger. One day, I'll just walk out the door and into a location with better exposure. This is the last poem I'm going to read from my other tongue. I forgot to bring my readers. I can't read my own poems anymore. It's so sad. Just do like this. Paramore. English is dirty, polyamorous. English wants me. English rides with girls and with boys. English keeps an open tab and never sleeps alone. English is a smooth talker who makes me say, please. It's a bit of role-playing, and I like a good tease. We have a safe word I keep forgetting. English likes pet names. English has a little secret, a past, another family. English is going to leave them for me. I've made English a set of keys. English brings me flowers stolen from a grave. English texts me, slips in as emoji, attaches selfies not suitable for work. English has rules but accepts dates last minute. English makes booty calls. English makes me want it. When I was younger, my parents said, "Keep that English out of our house. If you leave with that miserable, don't come back." I said, "God willing," in the language of the Inquisition. I climbed out my window but always got caught. English had a hoopty that was the joint. Now my mother goes gaga over our cute babies. Together, English and I wrote my father's obituary. How many times have I said it's over, and English just laughs and says, "Come on, senorita, let's go for Chinese." We always end up in a fancy hotel where we give fake names. And as I lay my head to hear my lover breathe, I dream of Sam Patch plunging into water, a poem English gave me that had been given to another. Do you know who Sam Patch is? Yeah? No? Who knows? So Sam Patch was a 19th century daredevil, and he met his fate in the Genesee River, in the Genesee Falls, and he would do these jumps off of falls in upstate New York, but he also did one in the Patterson Falls in New Jersey, and he was included in William Carlos Williams's book Patterson. So that's how I learned about Sam Patch. So I have, when writers would say things like, "I'm working on 2 different projects," I just thought, wow, 2 different projects. How does anybody work on 2 different projects? I'm lucky if I'm working on 2 different poems, right? But it happened to me. I'm working on 2 things that just happened, poems that ended up going into sort of 2 different areas. And one is called Fray, and this sort of takes up the thread, pun intended, of textile work that I've been writing about since I started writing, really, because it was around me. I grew up in Patterson, New Jersey. There were textile factories. My dad worked in a dye house. My mother had worked in a textile factories from 14 to 38 in Spain. So it's just textiles in the blood. So this is one of the poems from Fray, and then I'm going to read from another project. This is called Fashion's Cycle after Rana Plaza. Do you remember Rana Plaza? This was 2013 in Bangladesh. Rana Plaza had several different businesses in it, among them textile factories, and they collapsed, and 1,100 or more and more people died in that collapse. And they've prosecuted the owners because they knew there were structural problems with the building. So this came out of reading some of the accounts of the factory workers in those clothing factories. Fashion's Cycle after Rana Plaza. And this was in Bangladesh, by the way. Fashion's Cycle. To be born is to risk the ghost of a factory collapse, to try it on in intervals in front of the mirror. I loved the baby doll dress like no other. I can see it. I can see a hand reaching out to her brother as if to say, "We will make it out of here." I wore it out the door. So of course these clothing factories in Bangladesh were making clothes that we're all wearing, right? These are all, many of them, American companies who outsource their labor. The immigrant is friction. The immigrant is friction. Friction is fray. She didn't know it was not okay to give someone pantyhose as a graduation gift. From behind the bathroom door, I could hear them laughing at her. Rough around the edges, as they say. You have to wear yourself down by studying what makes others smooth. You study them. What makes them smooth? Their sentences, for one. How they say things like detritus even before breakfast, and agree perfectly subject to verb for generations. I can't face their judgment. I sweat it out, run them off the treadmill. What perfect grammar awaits in conditioning and in felt? What's felt? The past tense of feeling. A textile that instead of woven is made by wetting and rolling every curly fiber until the bristle lies quietly beneath a thick and matted surface. So even though my other tongue sounds very elegiac, my mom was actually alive when I finished it, but there was the anticipation, right, of the inevitable, which was she was going to die. We knew that was going to happen, so therefore the elegiac tone. But the poems that I'm writing now in fray have a lot to do with actually mourning her death. Capitalism ritual. The boutique owner pulled from racks variations on the same I'm going to start this over, I'm sorry. Capitalism ritual. The boutique owner pulled from racks variations on the same pricey and shapeless dress, and as I tried them on, she whispered into the fitting room, I wanted to burn everything I wore the next day and let me go into the cheap, cold night to borrow a t-shirt and skirt from someone's giveaway pile. I was rehearsing the ritual of shedding and casting off to the underworld and to the developing. She who keeps a dress perfectly suited to the burial of the mother will never break down behind a curtain should be a proverb. Later, I walked through any store and bought the first thing I saw. It'll change your life, the sales associate said as she rubbed the $40 cream into the back of my hand. It just sinks into the skin. How are we doing on time? Because I could always cut some stuff off of this pile. Are we doing okay? Okay. How much time do I have left? Maybe that's the better question. Do we know? I thought I timed well in the hotel, but you never know, because I talk a lot in between my poems. Okay, these are called the You poems, so tentatively titled the You poems, and it's the poems are addressed to a younger self, take place roughly in the 90s. That younger self is roughly me. But it's not memoir. You and cutoffs. You were maybe at your skinniest then. You wore cutoff shorts, Pumas, and a faux football jersey so tight your friends laughed and called you Jugs when you wore it. You hated football or didn't care and had yet to fall in love with a musician or become the crying girl who'd call in the middle of the night looking for him. It was the summer to be cool and light, to be lifted and carried across bodies until the bouncer had to pluck you from the lip of the stage and send you down the stairs. You'd make it back to the center again and signal skyward with your thumb, and someone would let you step into their interlaced fingers to boost you up. The bouncer looked annoyed each time you landed at his feet, but you could tell he really wasn't. You were small and cute and easy to pass from hand to hand. You, a hand, another. The following summer, you went to another concert and gave the thumbs up, and as you were carried, felt a hand inside your cutoffs and another inside your shirt, then another hand and another, as if the only thing keeping you up was also trying to crawl inside you. You started to kick back and punch down at anyone below you, even though it meant that hands, innocent or not, could pull away from your body, withdraw their support, let you drop. The one you loved, the one who thought crying girls a continuum, begged you in a letter not to risk yourself on a roof of strange fingers, and told the cautionary tale of a friend who fell into a sea of glass and with tweezers had to pick each green and brown shard from his arms and legs. By then, he was no longer a lover, but something of a pen pal and liked to sound wise somewhere out west. But you never fell. You made it out of the crowd, and later, at the tent, listened to other women tell stories similar to yours. Sniffles. I'm like blowing my nose on camera. So what time does this thing go? Just curious. 10 more minutes? Perfect. Okay. Okay. You and the pendulum. Okay, so this you didn't have health insurance for a long time, so that's good to know. So this you was working on Wall Street as a temp. So that's part of the context. You and the pendulum. She held a chain with a crystal suspended from it over different parts of your body and asked questions. Sometimes you told her what you needed to know. More often, she dangled the pendulum over an organ to interrogate implicitly its proper functioning. Even as her hand remained steady, the crystal would begin to swing from the chain in circles, clockwise or counterclockwise, giving a yes or no answer. These readings took place in her apartment, and although it was small and cluttered and had probably once been a cold water flat, you wondered if it was rent-controlled, because how else could she live there in that inflated market? You were having problems with digestion as you have since you were a kid, and she showed you how to massage your intestine, advising you based on the pendulum's answers to stay away from most nightshades. She sought a second opinion by holding the pendulum over one of the tomatoes on her kitchen table. And this seemed more efficient and less scary than a million needles pushed into the skin. But the question you waited to ask until the end was about the scientist with the British accent. Your gut told you everything would end with the summer, but as she held the pendulum and asked if he was your future, the chain began to vibrate and the crystal turned in small, then increasingly wider circles, faster and faster in the direction of yes. You wrote her a check and headed for a payphone to tell your scientist about the diagnosis. You to the future. What would you have said to the future? Future, you will have no scientist in it. Future, your scientist was kissing a Canadian. Future, you could have told me, don't go to his apartment, depress the doorbell for many seconds, wait in his favorite diner around the corner, call him from the dark and humid underground of your last rumbling hope. But future, let me tell you something truly remarkable. There were payphones on subway platforms, which was great when you needed one, but if you needed one, things were often not so great. You were late for an interview, or you wanted to be told, don't get on that train, I love you, come back to bed. No one on a subway payphone wanted to be told, hold on. You were lost, trying to buy weed, calling some guy's beeper. The receiver and keypad were archives of body come city. And in these moments of disorientation, of numbers black and waxy and sticky, the pointer finger brought you closer to your desire with its impeccable memory. Future, I guess you already know that lovers feel their feelings wherever and whatever the mode. On the body, no longer at home. A screen the size of a palm. But in you, future, no one will know what it's like to make a collect call, to reverse the charges, or remember the Spanish poet who once wrote an ode to his light bulb late one night in the kitchen. This is my last poem. You and the raw bullets. Why the image just now of a bullet entering the mouth? Why call it raw when it isn't sticky and pink like a turkey meatball, just the usual, gold and shiny and cylindrical? What about this bullet is uncooked? Why does it multiply with you in parka or short skirt, versions of the you that you were, swallowing raw bullets as you walked? The images come without assailant, without gun, just the holes the bullets opened, the holes through which they went. And now, at the age in which you ride enclosed in glass, like the Pope or President, you are spitting up the bullets, slow simmered in your own juices. You are shitting them out, feeling them drop from you in clumps of blood in the days of bleeding left. But you cannot expel all of them. Some, raw as the day they entered, have expanded their mushroom heads into the flesh, or lodged their hot tip into the taste center of the brain. Will the tongue's first encounter with pomegranate seeds be forever a lost Eden, that fruit of your girlhood, which, also meaning grenade, was perhaps never innocent? Do your own raw bullets come back to you, my friends? Let us legislate the active voice instead. Not many bodies have been used as blanks, aluminum cans, but here are the men who pulled the trigger. Look at them. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rosa, for keeping us in the fray. You can go consider My Other Tongue over there, courtesy of Mose, and maybe Rosa will sign a copy for you. As Giovanni said, come back on April 5th for local poet Matthew Zapruder. Thank you very much.